Video began spreading at lightning speed across social media. Cameras caught Joni Lamb's raw, unfiltered reaction at the exact moment the life sentence was announced, and viewers were stunned. No prepared speech, no calm smile, just pure emotion. People can't stop replaying it and asking the same question. What does this reaction really reveal about what's been happening behind the scenes? It was a moment no one saw coming. Joni Lamb, strong, radiant, and always full of conviction, sat before the cameras with a softness in her voice and a heaviness in her eyes. The set was familiar, the lighting warm, but something was different. Her usual spark was dimmed, and you could feel the weight in the air before she even spoke. Then, with millions watching, she delivered the words that left everyone stunned. "I've come to share something very important with you," she said, her voice trembling ever so slightly. "After much prayer and reflection, I've decided to step away from my role as the leader of this ministry." The reaction was immediate, a wave of silence, shock, disbelief. For decades, Joni had been the heart and face of the ministry, a force of faith and passion that people had relied on. But now, here she was, announcing what felt like the end of an era. And though she framed it as a peaceful, God-led decision, it still hit like a thunderclap. Her eyes welled with tears as she looked directly into the camera. She spoke about obedience, about God's timing, about the need to let the next generation lead. But behind every word was emotion, deep, raw, and real. This wasn't just a career move. This was goodbye to a role that had defined her life. A life sentence not of punishment, but of purpose. One she had lived out with everything she had. Fans called it heartbreaking. Some said it felt like losing a spiritual mother. Others couldn't stop replaying the video of her wiping away tears as she spoke of stepping back, not out of weakness, but out of surrender to something bigger than herself. And in that moment, Joni wasn't just a leader, she was human, fragile, honest, and brave enough to say, "It's time." At first, no one really noticed. Joni Lamb had always been a constant presence, on television, on stage, in interviews, or smiling brightly in behind-the-scenes moments shared with her ministry team. She had a voice people recognized instantly, a warmth that made viewers feel like they were sitting across from a friend, not just watching a broadcast. For years, she was everywhere. Her presence wasn't just consistent, it was dependable. But somewhere along the way, things began to change. It didn't happen overnight. It was subtle, like a song slowly fading out. There were fewer public appearances, fewer speeches, fewer updates from her personal social media. At first, fans thought maybe she was just taking a much-needed break. After all, she had been working non-stop for decades, building Daystar alongside Marcus, carrying on after his death, and leading with incredible strength, even through personal heartbreak. But then weeks turned into months, and her absence became impossible to ignore. Broadcasts that used to open with her voice were now led by others. Conferences she never missed were held without her. Live streams, once full of her encouragement and laughter, were happening without a single word from Joni. Loyal followers started asking questions. Is she okay? Where's Joni? Why haven't we seen her? The silence, ironically, was louder than anything she could have said. And that silence started something no one could stop: rumors. Some thought she might be dealing with serious health problems. There were whispers that she had been hospitalized or battling a private illness. Others believed she was going through a personal or spiritual crisis, struggling under the weight of everything she had carried for so long. And then there were those who feared the worst, that the pressures of leading a global ministry after Marcus's passing had finally become too much, and she had simply collapsed under the weight. None of it was confirmed. No official statement was made, but the longer the silence continued, the more people filled in the blanks with their own theories. Her absence had created a space that people rushed to fill with concern, with speculation, and sometimes with fear. What made it all even more confusing was how sudden it felt. Just a few months before, Joni had been delivering passionate messages, praying with viewers, and encouraging families across the world. She had seemed strong, maybe quieter than before, a little more introspective, but still strong. And then she was gone. Her absence didn't just feel physical, it felt emotional. It felt spiritual. For many of her longtime supporters, it was disorienting. Joni had been a spiritual anchor in their lives. Her words had carried people through grief, sickness, heartbreak, and doubt. She had become more than a voice on TV. She was someone people looked to for comfort, leadership, and truth. And now, that steady voice had gone quiet, and no one knew why. Among ministry insiders, the mood was mixed. Some said she needed rest, and that she had been pushing herself for years without pause. Others hinted that deeper struggles were at play, ones that had been building for a long time. The loss of Marcus, the family tension that followed, and the weight of public expectation had all taken their toll. Joni had never had the chance to truly grieve, they said. She had gone straight from widowhood to war, fighting to keep the ministry together, protect the legacy, and lead through chaos. Now it seemed her soul was simply tired. Some fans clung to hope, believing that her silence was temporary. They imagined a comeback, a surprise return, a powerful message that would explain everything. But others feared that Joni was gone for good, not just from leadership, but from the spotlight entirely. And in many ways, her silence spoke louder than words ever could. It revealed something very real about what happens when public figures, especially spiritual leaders, carry too much for too long. People often forget that behind the sermons, the smiles, the strength, are human beings. People who get sick, people who break down, people who suffer in silence because they're expected to be strong for everyone else. Joni had spent years being that strength. She carried the torch when Marcus passed. She held her family together. She stood in front of the world day after day, declaring God's goodness, even while her own world was shaken. But no one can carry that kind of burden forever without it showing. And maybe, just maybe, her sudden disappearance was her way of finally letting herself rest. For some, it felt like abandonment. For others, it was deeply relatable. Because who hasn't needed a break? Who hasn't wanted to disappear for a while when life becomes too much? Joni's silence, as painful as it was for many to witness, reminded people that strength doesn't always mean pushing through. Sometimes strength is knowing when to step back, even if no one understands why. And then, just when the rumors were at their peak, she returned, not with a loud comeback, not with a perfect explanation, but with a calm, emotional announcement that confirmed what many had feared. She was stepping away, not just for a vacation, not just for health, but for good. It was her time to hand over the reins, to release what she had held onto for so long, and to trust that the ministry and God would carry on without her in the front seat. Her quiet disappearance had led to weeks of uncertainty, but in the end, her return brought the one thing no rumor ever could: truth. And as painful as it was, that truth brought peace, because now, finally, the questions had answers. Joni wasn't gone because she had given up. She was stepping away because she had already given everything. When Joni Lamb finally sat down in front of the cameras to announce her decision, the atmosphere shifted immediately. Even before she spoke, there was a tension in the room, a kind of stillness that only happens when people know something big is coming. Her smile was gentle but tired. Her voice, usually so strong and full of energy, came through softer, like it carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken thoughts. And then she said it. She was stepping down. It was official. After decades of leading one of the most recognized Christian ministries in the world, Joni was leaving her role as the face and heart of the network. And the moment those words left her lips, the emotional fallout began, not just in the room, but across the world. Her family, sitting just off camera, knew it was coming. They'd had the conversations, the tearful nights, the prayers. But nothing really prepares you for hearing it said out loud, with finality. Her children tried to stay composed, but the emotion quickly broke through. One of her daughters wiped away quiet tears. Her eldest son stared down at the floor, his face still, but his heart clearly heavy. This was the woman who had raised them, led them, prayed over them through every chapter of their lives, and now she was stepping back, handing the future over to them. It didn't take long for the flood of reactions to start pouring in. Within minutes of the announcement going live, social media lit up. Longtime viewers and followers shared their shock, confusion, and heartbreak. People who had grown up watching Joni on TV described feeling like they had just lost a spiritual mother. Others simply said, "I'm not ready for this." And, truthfully, many weren't. One woman commented, "I've watched Joni every week for 18 years. I've cried with her, prayed with her, and found comfort in her voice. I feel like a part of my life just ended." Another man wrote, "It feels like the foundation is shifting, like something important is leaving the room and we're not sure what's coming in to replace it." Many responses were filled with gratitude. People shared stories of how Joni's words had helped them through illness, divorce, the loss of loved ones. For some, she was the first voice they heard after a bad diagnosis. For others, she was a steady presence during the pandemic, delivering hope when the world felt dark and uncertain. Her retirement stirred up those memories all over again, and along with them, tears. But as the sadness sank in, so did worry. People started asking, what now? What happens to the ministry without Joni? Who takes over? Will it still feel the same? The fear wasn't just about losing a familiar face. It was about the future of something that had touched millions of lives. Would her family honor her vision? Would the network lose its direction? Some longtime supporters expressed nervousness that the next generation might change the ministry too much, steering it in a direction that felt unfamiliar. Others were concerned about division within the family, particularly after past tensions had made headlines. Could they work together? Could they carry the same spiritual weight that Joni had carried so gracefully for decades? Inside the Lamb family, those questions weren't ignored. Joni's children felt the pressure instantly, especially her son, who had been involved in the ministry behind the scenes and was now expected to step into a much bigger leadership role. While he had grown up surrounded by cameras, sermons, and production meetings, stepping into his mother's shoes was a different level entirely. He loved the ministry, he loved the people, but even he admitted privately to close friends that it felt overwhelming. His mother wasn't just a leader, she was an icon in the faith community. And following someone like that isn't just about capability, it's about trust. Would the audience accept him? Would they listen? Would they feel the same spiritual connection? Even among staff members at the network, the transition sparked emotional tension. Some were hopeful, others were scared. Joni had been their constant, the calm in every storm, the final decision maker, the one who prayed before every difficult moment. Her absence left not just a leadership gap, but an emotional one too. Still, in the midst of it all, there was also love. Deep, enduring love. The outpouring of support Joni received was staggering. Flowers, letters, emails, prayers. People from all over the world reached out to say thank you. Churches she had visited years ago sent videos of their congregations praying for her and her family. Former guests and ministry partners sent personal notes remembering how Joni had encouraged them during their hardest seasons. She had spent so long lifting others up. Now, the people she served were lifting her. In one of her final messages before stepping back, Joni said, "This decision isn't about giving up. It's about giving over. I'm not disappearing. I'm trusting." And that simple line struck a chord, because even in her goodbye, she was still leading, with grace, with humility, and with deep faith. For now, the future is still unfolding. There are transitions to manage, changes to navigate, and a legacy to protect. But one thing is clear, the emotion stirred by Joni's decision wasn't just about sadness. It was a reflection of just how deeply she was loved, how much her work mattered, and how profoundly she had impacted lives. And while the questions remain, so does the truth. Her voice may be quieter now, but her influence is far from gone. When Joni Lamb sat in front of that familiar camera one final time, it wasn't just another message. It was a passing of the torch, a quiet surrender, a bold act of trust. She had spent years as the voice of encouragement to millions, the face of one of the most well-known Christian networks in the world. Through heartbreak, loss, and moments of crisis, she showed up. Even when her voice trembled, she still spoke. Even when her heart was heavy, she still smiled. She had been a symbol of resilience for decades, but now she was doing something much harder than showing strength. She was letting go. The decision wasn't made overnight. It came after many long nights, silent prayers, and conversations with God that didn't always come with clear answers. Joni knew her time as the leader of the ministry was coming to a close, not because she stopped caring, not because she was tired of the work, but because she had given everything she had. And it was time for someone else to carry the mission forward. There was no formal script that could make a moment like that easier. When she looked into the lens that had captured so many years of her life, she simply spoke from the heart. "I've done what I was called to do," she said softly. Now, it's time for the next generation to rise. It wasn't a dramatic farewell. It wasn't filled with finality or regret, but it held a weight that was impossible to ignore. The future of the ministry, one she and Marcus had poured their lives into, was now out of her hands. And yet, as uncertain as that future may have felt to some, Joni's words carried something deeper than certainty. They carried faith. Faith that God was still in control. Faith that the seeds she had planted over decades would keep growing. And most of all, faith in the next generation, in her children, her team, and the people who had grown up under her guidance. Behind the scenes, the transition wasn't simple. Stepping away from something that large, with staff, global operations, and a deeply loyal audience, takes courage and humility. But Joni wasn't just walking away. She was handing over responsibility carefully, prayerfully, and with intention. She had watched her children grow up inside the ministry. They had seen the good, the hard, and the deeply spiritual side of the work. They knew the cost of public leadership. They knew the late nights, the quiet sacrifices, and the relentless commitment it took to keep going even when the cameras turned off. They knew because they lived it right alongside her. And now, it was their time. Her eldest son had already begun taking on more leadership in the months before her retirement. But the moment his mother officially stepped back, the weight of that responsibility settled in like never before. He was proud. He was ready. But he also knew the shoes he was stepping into weren't just big. They were sacred. The staff at the network, too, felt the shift. Some had been there since the beginning. Others were newer, but all of them had been shaped by Joni's leadership. There were tears, quiet hugs, and deep reflections as they accepted the change. Many wondered how things might evolve. Would the tone of the ministry change? Would the same values be preserved? And most of all, would the audience, the people who had followed Joni's journey for decades, accept the next chapter? There was no guarantee. No one knew exactly how the future would unfold. That's the nature of transition. It carries both promise and risk. And yet, Joni didn't step back with fear. She stepped back with peace. "I don't know every detail of what's next," she said, "but I do know God never starts something He doesn't intend to finish." She expressed full trust in her team, not just trust in their skills, but in their hearts. She believed they would keep the message alive, not just repeating her words, but living them in new, fresh ways. She didn't want them to become copies of her. She wanted them to step fully into who God created them to be. That kind of trust takes deep maturity and deep faith. Some viewers struggled with the change. Joni had been their constant in a world of change. Her voice had been the one they leaned on in their darkest seasons. So letting go, even from a distance, wasn't easy for them. The transition felt like a loss, even if they believed in the future. But Joni never asked anyone to pretend it was easy. She acknowledged the sadness. She embraced the tears. And still, she reminded them, the mission is bigger than any one person. It's not mine. It's His. And He's not done. She reassured them that while she wouldn't be on screen like before, she wasn't disappearing. She would still be there, quietly praying, offering wisdom, and cheering on the next generation. She would no longer lead from the front, but she would support from behind with the same love and fire she always had. What happens now? The truth is, no one knows every detail. The next generation is learning in real time what it means to lead, to carry a legacy, and still create space for something new. They're making decisions, building their own voices, and learning to trust God's guidance in the same way their mother and father once did. The ministry may look different in the years ahead. The world itself is changing. Faith is being expressed through new platforms, new conversations, new generations. And with change comes challenges, but also opportunities. Joni didn't fear the change. She welcomed it. She understood that legacy doesn't mean copying what came before. It means honoring it while moving forward with courage. That's the kind of leader she was, and still is. As for the future, one thing is clear. It's not defined by certainty, but by calling. And Joni passed that calling on not with fear in her eyes, but with faith in her heart. She believed the same God who sustained her through decades of public ministry will continue to guide the ones stepping in now. She believed that new voices would rise, new messages would be preached, and the hearts of people around the world would continue to be touched. And in that belief, she found peace. Because while seasons change and leaders step aside, the mission lives on. And the torch she carried for so long, with passion, with pain, with joy, and with sacrifice, now burns in the hands of a new generation, a generation she believes in completely,